Welcome and hello, everybody. It is good to see you here. This is my second webinar this week. It has been an absolutely busy week, but this is a very popular topic, clearly based on the number of attendees. And I love that you all have been saying hello and introducing yourselves in the chat. Please continue to do that. Share where you're from. Share your LinkedIn profiles if you want. It's great. This whole community is better when it's connected, when people know each other, and we can all support the growth of this critical industry. So yeah, keep up that great work there. Thank you very much. Couple housekeeping items. This is going to be a conversation, but we very much want to hear from you. So we're going to try to keep ample time at the end for Q&A. And if you do have questions, please put them into the actual Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen. They get lost in the chat, so make sure they go there. And thanks in advance for doing that. And without further ado, let's introduce our two esteemed guests here, Dan and Andy. Dan, I'll start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about AeroGrowth and what you do.
Yeah, so Dan Echternkamp, founder of AeroGrowth. We started out originally as strategic sales coaching. And what we've really become is a network for manufacturers across the aerospace and defense industry. We're working closely with ProShop as one, as well as a lot of the primes and defense tech companies, and just here to connect. We're here to help as many people get to know each other as possible and share knowledge and share information. I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as competition in our industry. We can all make each other stronger, and that's what our mission is at AeroGrowth.
Heck yeah, I love your mission. So alignment. All right, Andy, thank you for being here. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, Andreau Garcia. I'm the Intelligent Factory Product Manager and Lead Engineer at Lockheed Martin. My team, we work on IoT solutions on the shop floor, and we look at ways to do business a little bit better through automation. We'll call it the digital thread. And prior to Lockheed, I've worked at a few small businesses on the supply chain side, supporting multiple primes as well, doing supply chain, supplier managed inventory, point of use replenishment, things like that.
Okay, I love the fact that you have experience on both sides of the supply chain. That's super valuable, and thank you again for coming here today. So I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. We may or may not flow this exactly. I think it's going to be a very organic conversation. There's a few key themes here we're going to talk about. We're definitely going to talk about cybersecurity. That's a big shifting landscape. And, there's some misinformation or just some, there's some knowledge that needs to be shared. So we're going to be talking about that. We're definitely going to be talking about digital thread. That has been a sort of a major theme as of late. How the primes can de-risk what they do, how they choose vendors, and transparency and making sure things work seamlessly is a critical part of that, right? That's something that has been a premise for ProShop for a long, long time. And yeah, it's just look forward to sharing that part of it as well. And I'm just going to turn off the slides so we can see each other here a little bit better. So I want to frame this with kind of the state of sort of where things are at. Dan, you have shared some incredible statistics with me of how fast the primes and the defense base needs to scale up, needs to rebuild munitions, all those different things. Can you just share maybe a little bit about the demand that you're seeing and how that relates to the shops and the opportunities they have to be a part of that?
Yeah, throughout the defense, Department of War's obviously issued a massive calling for scale from its primes, and they're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5x their rates within the next 2 to 4 years. And so to think about billions of dollars already in spend and supply chain demands now being 3 to 4 or 2 to 4x of that within the next 2 to 3 years shows how rapid this is increasing. And that's just in defense and Department of War requests. Now you look at space tech and all of these other things, those aren't stopping either. SpaceX is launching at unbelievable rates, and there's counterparts that are trying to keep up with them and catch up to them. So the demand on us as manufacturers is just, it's incredible right now. It's a perfect time to be alive and grow your business and setting yourself up for it.
Okay. Yeah, and Andy, what's your perspective, being at a very large prime and trying to, build a process that makes it work well for shops to provide what Lockheed needs to serve your own mission.
Yeah, I would say, from my perspective, right, it goes kind of back to what we mentioned, like the digital thread concept. Right now, there's a large amount of shops out there, and so making the right decisions, selecting the right folks to work on some of these contracts is the biggest piece. And I think everybody's opportunity in general, not just again my industry, but all the other industries, is working smarter and faster. And so selecting the right partners is paramount, and providing guidance to those partners is paramount to the mission. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I was having a conversation with sort of a supply chain engineer at a space company, and they were saying that they still open up a Google search and type, machine shop near me, or, whatever,
yeah,
machine shop that can do titanium. And they're literally, browsing search results and then, emailing a shop or sending them a survey and, getting that back as a PDF file. And then, maybe having a conversation. They may or may not have even the bandwidth to go visit them and vet them more thoroughly. Um, and then sometimes the results of giving them their first order, sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's pretty catastrophic and they got to start over from scratch. So even just the finding and connecting with shops is a challenge. And I know from just being so tight in the industry, there are lots of amazing shops that can't figure out how to get a good foot in the door. So we definitely
Right.
need to sort of help, and hopefully what we're trying to do here today is provide some guidance and advice to shops to, prepare themselves for these conversations, what they can do to be attractive, how they can go about doing that, and hopefully build this connection to help, support this 2 to 5x, ramp up in what needs to be purchased over the next several years. So
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in real quick on that.
yeah, you bet.
I think it's for any shop out there. I think it's important first and foremost to know where you've come from, and then where you are today, and then lastly where you want to go. And if you understand all three of those things intuitively, and just that's in your nature at this point, you focus on where you've come from, and that's the most valuable part of you and what your company is, because it shows that you have the ability to get where you are today. And then your goals, of course, you want to have that mission of, if you're a $1 million shop, I want to be a $5 million shop. Fantastic. Let's start setting the stage and building our vision, our mission, and our outbound towards that $5 million company, not where you're at today. And then I think Andy can piggyback off of that with regards to, CMMC and all these other things. $1 million shop doesn't have the same requirements of CMMC that a $5 million shop has, or, things of that nature. So that's where I think it's important to understand all of those three things intuitively, and really don't be afraid of it. I mean, where you've come from is fantastic. Where you are today is even better, and where you are tomorrow is going to be the best version of you. So
Love that.
so yeah, let me add to that too. So I would say, right, I would frame everything that we talk about today as continuous improvement. So think from the CMMC perspective, right? It's a requirement that's being flown down, but it's a continuous improvement opportunity, right? So when we look at like AS9100 and quality management, which we'll discuss today, right? Those things, yes, they're requirements, but they better your business, right? They force you to have a methodical look at your business and how you work, right? So everything that we discuss today is going to be really around continuous improvement and growing your business, right?
Mhm.
CMMC requirements, yes, it's a requirement, but it actually helps build your business and make you more resilient. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, I know there's, I'm a firm believer in that as well, especially AS9100 has been a thing for a long, long time. I know when our shop first went and got ISO and then went to AS, like it was a bit of a forcing function for us to just run things tighter, do things, better, a little less cowboy, a little less sort of shooting from the hip. And while sometimes that feels like it's a little onerous, because like I could just do this thing right in 5 seconds, or I could do it the AS way in 20 seconds. at the end of the day, you're going to save a ton more time and have a lot less headaches if you're doing that sort of more thorough process that the standard requires. And there's so many parallels, as you say, Andy, to cybersecurity. It really is just a framework for doing things a certain way. So why don't you maybe share a little bit more? We know that there was a pause on the stage 2 for third-party assessments, but none of the underlying requirements for the NIST standard or the DFARS clauses went away at all. So maybe just share a little bit about how shops could be thinking about this as they be a vendor.
Yeah. So think of it from this perspective. That pause is really to help from a financial perspective, right? To help get the small shops and medium-sized shops to get themselves aligned. And I would say, right, that's great in some cases, but in other cases, we go back to like a AS 100 audit mindset, right? The pause doesn't stop us from doing things now, right? So um, it really just gives, in my opinion, my perspective is it gives the shops time to get their affairs in order, right? Let's audit ourselves. And so majority of these teams, I would hope that have, internal audit teams that are walking through their processes, walking through their quality management side. So right now, this pause is giving everybody the opportunity to audit, right? Take the checklist, take these items, these control points, and audit your business now while you have this pause, right? Because it's not just for the small shops, right? It's also for the primes. We're all trying to figure out exactly how we flow this down, right? There's going to be requirements internally at a Lockheed or a Northrop or whoever it is, and flow that down. But now you still have the human in the loop piece, which is your buyers, your procurement specialists that are communicating these things. And so I think across the entire landscape through the value stream between prime and down, it's an opportunity, not just for the small shops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as someone is doing that assessment for themselves, we know there's the SPURS score system where they can submit their scores. What's some guidance for a shop about how, should they get to a certain score level as a self-assessment before they even submit into that system? Or
Yes.
the best practice?
So I would say this, right? Because again, guidance will change day to day. I would say, one, right, if you already have a prime contract, that's where the relationship between you and your subcontractor procurement specialist is paramount, making sure that you understand exactly what the expectation is, because that'll be flown down, right, from the buyer down to the shops. So that guidance will be explicitly stated from that side of things. I would say that there's some rough guidance on what that score looks like, but I would take it at this level, right? And I would say from our view, we're looking at level 1 as a minimum requirement. If you have anything to do with prime in any way, shape, or form, whether you touch CUI or ECI at all, or you don't, if you're tied to a prime contract, level 1 is a requirement, right? That's going to be needed because that level 1 means that you will see something with regards to federal contract information, whether it's actually CUI or ECI, you'll have something which is derivative issues, right? So we don't want that to leak. So I would say everybody needs to meet that level 1 requirement out the gate if you have anything to do with prime contracts. So that's number 1. I would say with regards to the score, I don't want to give misinformation or bad information. So I would say that guidance needs to definitely come from their procurement specialist who's flowing down the information. That should definitely come.
Yeah, if they're at the point where they're doing have a specialist, procurement specialist yet, they are trying to knock on the door of any prime. Any guidance on how they should prepare for even having that first conversation, or
Sure.
get a little bit more visibility on their company?
Yeah. So, right, when we're talking about prior to, which is, right, so this goes back to auditing, self-auditing, getting all that stuff done. Now I'm going to upload my score, my self-assessment, all of those things. That I would say doesn't provide the visibility because that's still communication between the prime and the shop still has to, hey, here's my screenshot, right? But this now this will go to that second discussion, I think, which is the digital thread I think we go into more. But that score doesn't really make anybody attractive, I would say, right? I would say for the most part, most shops should be able to meet that minimum requirement for a level 1 if they do the due diligence, right? But that doesn't really separate you from the rest of the shops.
Sure.
Right.
And really, that's what we get into when we talk about the second discussion about digital thread. So that's just meeting the requirement. I think I would have that mindset that 80% of the shops should meet CMMC 1 requirements, right? Majority of the shops have controls in place. If they do the process audit, they'll find that maybe they don't have access control where it needs to be, logging where it needs to be. But if they change either process or behaviors, they can meet that minimum requirement. So I would say from the shop's perspective, that should not be your number one concern. Treat it like a QMS audit, tied into what you're doing. That should be your normal day to day. Audit it, right? Find weak points, find issues. If I have access control issues, handle that now, right? As a business, but then also, I don't know if you want to segue into this now, but this goes back to, right? What is your actual scope? What does your portfolio look like?
Yeah, go
Right?
for it.
Is the majority of your business prime, or is it a small percent? And that's where you start discussing, do I go and retrofit my entire IT environment and infrastructure, or do I build an enclave for that work? Right.
Right.
Those are things that even before you start going down that path, it's that self-assessment, right? What is my current portfolio? And then you start looking at your level of effort at that point. We're not trying to boil the entire ocean, right? We have to level set first. I think a lot of the times this is, back in the day when this first came up, when I was at my small business, that was the first thing we did. We boiled the ocean. We looked at everything. And an audit's not to look at everything. It's to look at things that are specific to, right, which is going to be federal contract information, ECI, CUI. So I would say before we even go down that path, self-assess.
Yeah. Andy, I want to ask you, just because of your experience, to be level 1, does that require outside support, or is that something pretty much
It's
anybody would be able to kind of check?
anybody. Yeah. So when the first deployment of CMMC came out, it was a lot more convoluted, I would say. But it is still the same thing you can do internally. There's no third-party support really needed. Obviously, you need to have folks on your team internally that understand systems thinking, right? Because you take the concept of the CMMC, right? We look at it from like, what is your system security plan? That's just your quality manual, right? And
Mhm.
so if you start decoding these things, like objective evidence, what is my artifacts, which is what would be in CMMC. If you have a quality management system, your quality team, your internal auditors could manage this piece. If you don't have a large IT organization, leverage your quality teams and start deciphering between the two, your quality management and then your IT management, right? Combine those two and you're good to go. I would say if there's nuances, there's always third parties out there, IT organizations that can help answer certain questions. But again, I wouldn't go into some huge engagement, right? Take the time, sit down with your quality team, and let's build out an audit perspective, right?
So, Andy, I'm curious to ask this because we sometimes talk to shops that have been on-prem maybe for their entire existence with all their
Mhm.
data.
Mhm.
And they say sometimes, oh, I do this type of work for defense and my customers require me to be on-prem. They won't let me go to the cloud.
Sure.
But we now know that a FedRAMP compliant environment is absolutely possibly even preferred. So I'd love to hear any guidance that you guys might have about the concept of being on-prem versus cloud, and is there a preference or one that's perceived as
Yeah.
more?
So I think, and I'll say this broadly, this is not a mere, LM or prime thing. I think there's a perception, right, that cloud is safer, right? In some cases, all cloud is an on-prem somewhere else that someone else is managing,
That's great.
right? You're not managing the hardware, you're not managing upgrades, you're not managing all of that, right? Someone else is managing. If you have a virtual machine and hardware starts to degrade, someone moves your VM somewhere else, right? It's a service, right? What cloud is. There's literally no difference between on-prem and cloud from that perspective.
Right.
It's just the upfront cost, right? There's a sunken cost for on-prem. And so from that perspective, cloud is attractive because you don't have to manage equipment and things, right? And so I think, and I would say widely, the primes, cloud sounds great because it's also easier to integrate in the cloud.
Yeah.
The digital thread becomes more of a possibility versus on-prem, because now if you have on-prem, you have your data stored locally. How do I get access to that? How do you push that, right?
Mhm.
And now you have to depend on the capacity or capability of folks at the site, at the company, to manage that. You get into a cloud solution, right? There's support. It's a wider support. So obviously you go from a sunken cost of on-prem to recurring costs, right? That
Sure.
so yeah.
Okay.
You just blew my mind. I honestly thought that in my head, it made more sense for on-prem. Like that was safer. But the way you just laid that out, I'm like, no, why would you want to do
Yeah.
on-prem? It makes way more sense to be able to
Yes.
have.
Yeah, so I would say, right, so if you start getting into higher classified data sets, you typically do on-prem, right? Because it's a mindset, right? And I would say that there's opportunities with regards to cloud because someone else is managing your data. This is when you start talking about GovCloud, FedRAMP, and all those types of things because there's controls in place, right? But anything that's digital has a possibility for a threat vector to take things.
Yeah.
So whether you're on-prem, whether you're in the cloud, it's still some server rack somewhere, someone's managing it, right? And so you still have to have proper policies in place for your cloud instance of traversing over the networks and things like that. None of that goes away, right? It just gets, I'll call it quote unquote, easier or more digestible in the cloud environment because you have interfaces. So you think about AWS or Azure, there's interfaces, right? And they have a huge support staff that can teach you and tell you what to do versus having maybe you're not so big IT team that's never done cloud or never done on-prem properly, right? So it's kind of what is needed for, I would say it this way, and I would frame it this way. And this goes back to the enclave statement. What is needed for your use case? What is your use case? Define that. Cloud may work in some cases. I would say most cases, if a company doesn't have a large prime footprint, cloud solves almost 95% of your issues, right? You've got your access control, you've got your logging, you've got your patching. I know who went in, who went out. I can manage what has access and all these different things. And that's great. In some cases, if you're a larger company and you have a huge legacy system, you may have to go through phases, right? Where you harden your current process and then you think about going to cloud once you have the capital. But this goes back to the statement before about, the bid and proposal. Once I get to that point, if I don't have my self-assessment and if I haven't reviewed myself internally, I cannot put that information into my bid and proposal, right?
Right.
Because it's a cost.
Mhm.
And so if I look at cost or pricing data roll-ups, if I do a self-assessment and find the gaps in what I currently have, I can tie that into my bid, right? Your contract folks can say, okay, for us to service this, we need to do X, Y, and Z, right? Now you can start pricing that properly. But if you don't do the self-assessment beforehand, what tends to happen is, oh, I didn't realize this at the beginning. Now I'm eating all of that. I'm eating that cost 110%, right? And so before we get like stuck on like the technical piece of it, just do a self-assessment, see where you're at. Because maybe you do need that cloud service, maybe you do need new infrastructure, but then you can find the cost of that and quote that in or bid that in, right? There's ways to manage that, but if you do it early on, there's no surprises.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. This has definitely been a very broadly discussed topic among shops. Is there's all these new requirements, but they already feel like they're sort of maxed out on what they can charge, but yet they have to now comply with all these requirements. Are you saying they should, add a line item to their quote for the NIST compliance, or just
Yeah, so I would
elaborate?
say, right, yeah, so in their roll-ups, right, again, so let me say it this way. No one wants a company to fail, and no one wants a company to take undue cost that harms them right? And causes them to choose between two different things, right? Versus getting the thing out the door with 100% quality, or work on CMMC, but then my quality reduces, right? We don't want those things either. And so the sooner that we, I would say this, it depends on the engagement, how they build their contracts, how the procurement process and the relationship is. But yes, if there's a way for them and how their contracts are written to include those costs, I mean, they do that now, right? So um, tie that in as you can based on your relationship and your engagement. Um,
Okay. Right.
So I can just charge a prime for my entire compliance. Say it's going to be a $250,000 expense. Here you go, pay it.
I would say that that's
Just
a
kidding, I
good
know it's
conversation. That's a great conversation to have with
Hey,
your contracts person. Yeah, but I mean, it's a thing to bring up, right? Because then that, this pause, and this again, this is my personal opinion. We don't have objective evidence of what it's going to cost
right.
the small caps to do any of this. And so I would say this goes back to the audit discussion about QMS. What do you bring objective evidence, right? So if I have objective evidence that for me to meet these requirements cost me this, do it, find it, right? And so that helps guide the discussions from the government all the way down of how we manage this. But if, again, it's like closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't communicate the need, the impact to your business, there is no funds for it, right?
Yeah.
So since I'm not a contracts person, right, I would say there's no harm, no foul in communicating the need, right, the impact to your business.
100%.
So
Yeah, it brings me to a point. I just want to touch on this because I loved this conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. The value goes both ways, meaning the prime needs the suppliers just as bad as the suppliers need the primes. And it's okay to push back and share how it hurts your business, just like the prime would do to you. Your increase, if a prime is comfortable going and saying, hey, your price increase is going to hurt our business, we can't do that. You should have the same comfort in saying to the prime, we have to raise our prices because of the compliance requirements or because of this or that, and be able to have that, the comfort in having those conversations.
yes,
It's not a David versus Goliath. It's really
correct.
even
Yeah,
playing.
agreed. So I would say it this way, right? When you think about financial audits, right? What is the number one thing you have to have? Objective evidence, right? And so making a statement based on objective evidence is what it is, right? So now it's not subjective. It's not how I feel. It's not, asking for money for X, Y, and Z. It's objectively what for me to service you, whether it's a current contract or a future state. Because if it's a future state, I'm going to add it to my bid, and we go through the jargon. Someone mentioned in chat, right? It wholly depends on compliance and what's needed, right? From that perspective, document it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't document it, there's no evidence that there's an impact to you.
Right.
And then, right, we talk about it wholly as the not just a specific contract or a specific company, but if everybody's doing this, documenting the need, now you can take that samples into a population and saying, hey, this is the impact to the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
But if we aren't collecting that information and providing that information and communicating it, no one will know. So I think it's super important. Again, it's wholly dependent on the contract and your engagement, but that information's valuable either way.
Yeah.
Okay. So Andy, you have alluded to this digital thread a few times. Why don't we sort of start digging into that a little bit more?
Yes.
Frame the conversation just like from your perspective or the perspective of a prime that's buying things from shops. What does that even mean? What are you looking for? What's attractive? What do you guys need there?
Yeah. So let's say if I'm in a current engagement with somebody, I run out of material on the floor, let's say, right? Like, hey, I need to pull material in. How do I do that? I send an email to somebody. Hey, Joe, what's your current stock? Right? We need to pull some stuff in. Joe's on vacation, but I need material tomorrow, right? Joe's backup's not monitoring the emails. We're stuck. What I would love to do is go onto my online interface and look at your inventory, right? Because that's servicing this contract. It drives to digital transparency, right? And so that's what's attractive. So let's say, you've got 10 shops, they all can produce the material. 10 people produce it, they can do it. They meet all my requirements and specs. But the one company has a digital thread. They can send me compliance data work, they can send me traceability, they can send me inventory updates, right? All through the digital thread. I don't have to send an email. I don't require the human in the loop. I don't need a procurement specialist to reach out to another person who then reach out to another person, right? Having that visibility, right, is paramount, and that's what makes things attractive. And I would say, right, it goes through. I would frame it this way: data transparency is a competitive advantage for the shops, because the more I can see, the more I can trust you with. If I understand your business and your health, right? Think of it as that. It's health metrics, right? You have an Apple Watch. I can see how I'm doing today. If I can look and go online and say, hey, how's business A doing? Oh, they're doing great. I have that comfort. I can see what you're doing. I'm going to more than likely, and again, this is my opinion, I'm going to want to do more business with you. What is your capacity and capability to do more versus another business that I don't have that visibility, right? So I would say that's the most important thing going forward in this environment we're in, right? We talk about AI and all these different things. Having visibility to that also lets me now look upstream and then plan downstream, because I have all of that information.
So this brings up an interesting conversation that I've had with primes and with shops. Like, how much is too much information, and is there a possibility that if you share, for example, like operation level work order details and statuses, are you at risk of freaking someone out that you haven't started
Yes.
operation 50 when the due date is next week, but that's fully fine because operation 50 is you're gonna bust through that in 6 hours and it'll be onto the thing, and you're gonna deliver just fine on time. But yet someone without that context might be like, oh my gosh, they haven't even started this yet, and there's alarm bells are going off. So where's that balance?
So think of like on the shop floors, right? For decades, what is that one thing you have above a machine that tells you the machine's running and the machine's not running? The and-on light.
And-on light,
right?
Yep.
Takes away all subjectivity, feelings. It is green, good, red, bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say with regards to data and information, like you mentioned, is too much data bad? Absolutely. I would say too much data is worse than no data, right? Because now it's, what's it, a picture's worth 1,000, whatever, right? Like I'm all over the place now. I have taken myself down several different rabbit holes because I'm trying to decipher the data. So when we say the digital thread, we want to connect data, we want to have access to the data, but we need to curate the data.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. And so I would say, like, so from your perspective, Paul, right? Like if you have data coming from your customers, right, your shops into your application, if I wanted to pull data from you, I would hope we curate it, right? Because you don't just dump everything.
Sure.
Right. So now I have data points, I have specific data sets, I have parameters set. I know what this means. So like to your point, they haven't started op 15. Op 30 needs to start tomorrow, but I don't realize that op 15 takes 20 minutes. Right. But
Sure.
that's where curating the data and presenting the data in a way it needs to is powerful. So digital threat, digital transparency is important, but curation of that's like my team in general, we curate data because everybody hoards data. There's data everywhere, right? Whether you're a digital shop or analog shop, analog shops have rooms full of boxes full of data, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Digital places we have servers in full of data that is just raw and you have no idea how to use it.
Right.
So having access to data is important, but curating it is really important, which is again like what you guys do with your applications, right? You curate the data.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
in terms of data transfer, the idea of a buyer being able to log into a shop's sort of portal means that buyer is still having to go do that, and they're trying to manage 50 vendors. They're logging into 50 different portals. Do you guys have an initiative to have the vendors kind of report into a system that's central to you, so your buyers can just like have a central place to monitor risk?
Yeah, so good question, right? So we've had, I think there's different initiatives across the enterprise. And so I would say at a high level, yes, right? We want to move away, to your point, right? Right now we're in the world of emails and PDFs, right? Think of like ExoStar, there's a portal I pull, but someone has to then go in there and pull the thing out. Right? The goal now is to build APIs, right? Or endpoints where data is ready, data is pushed or pulled, and I consume it automatically. And so now, if I'm in my system as a prime, I've got your data. I can go see my visualizations, my insights, my dashboards that I look at every day, and I know what's going on at your company. So I think, right, it's like the idea of like industry 4.0, 5.0, 3.0. I would say email and PDF is, yeah, ExoStar is so much fun. Yes, it is. Right, you've got this. I would call that level one. Let's just forget about the past for a moment. Email, PDF, and these systems are legacy, right? Now we get into pushing data, but I still got to go to a portal, pull it, which is like the ExoStar concept. Now I need to figure out, how do I bridge the two systems? That's the next piece. And I think from what we've been doing internally as a team, and just as I would say as an industry, that's where we have to go. So like companies like yours, right? Having that data curated and having that API open to the customer to consume it is huge. It removes the human in the loop.
Yep.
So if Teddy takes a vacation, he didn't go into ExoStar, or he didn't see the email, that completely goes away, right? Those types of things.
Okay. Yeah, comment. I thought Lockheed was moving away from ExoStar. Is that a myth or?
Neither confirm nor deny.
Okay. Right.
No, so I would say, right, every system, and so that's why I don't like using systems, like specific systems, because we change systems every day, right? But I would say the concept is you have this portal, you pull the data.
Yep.
But yeah.
Okay. We have some questions coming in. I don't know if we got about 20 minutes remaining. What oh gosh, what was I just had a thought that just escaped my mind. Let me just take a pause here and kind of look through these questions that were coming in here. Yeah, so Adam Max asked a good one. So, ITAR has been a thing for quite a long time. Now, of course, there's CMMC and the NIST standard. ITAR is something you have to pay to be a part of. And I know it's different. Export control is different than cybersecurity. But any thoughts on how someone should think about that, and will they converge someday? Or I don't know if you have an opinion on that or not.
Yes. So CUI versus ECI. ECI is controlled by ITAR, right? So it's their umbrella, the same essentially, but ECI is in that umbrella. If you're ITAR, you still continue that until they merge and streamline that. I personally don't see that being impacted anytime soon. That's just my opinion. But ITAR regulations requirements are completely separate from this perspective. Think of CMMC as just your hygiene,
Sure.
right? Your digital hygiene. And so CMMC, and I think, in my opinion, next 10 years, once we actually implement this, God willing soon, right? It's no longer CMMC is coming down the pike. It's just, I do business and I'm CMMC compliant. And so if you aren't compliant, then you aren't doing things that you need to from a process perspective.
Right.
CMMC is just a process audit. Think of it that way, right? Just like AS9100 is a process audit. It's your process. If you can't pass the audit, you don't have good processes in place or substantial processes in place, I would say. But ITAR is completely separate. I don't see that going away, but that's just, again, my opinion. There's been no guidance on that So
Sure. Okay. Would love to come back to CUI a little bit. When we were prepping for this call, you were saying that not even all defense related, drawings or models may be CUI, because some have been out there so long that they're not necessarily CUI, but different programs are. And then there's the whole marking things. We know there's a big problem with things not being marked properly. How might you advise a shop to think about
yeah.
this whole topic?
Yeah. So the number one mistake in classifying CUI is after the award. That's the number one mistake, obviously, because it's after, right? And so this where it goes into the bid and proposal, the relationship building with your prime. Ask questions, everything. If you do not have a clear, defined explanation on something that you're getting, that you're receiving, ask, right? Require it. You cannot there cannot be any ambiguity. So this goes back to the process audit, right? So when I start the bid and proposal, if there's ECI and CUI, I've already started the process that introduces ECI and CUI. The second I'm at the bid and proposal, right? So now, right, if I take this information in and I don't have understanding, seek to understand immediately. Right. This is where as a sub tier, you are in control. And honestly, you have the responsibility and the authority to do that, because you are now the threat vector. I'll call it the threat vector, because now you have data, right? If you do not know what's ECI and CUI, how do you safeguard, you protect it? Right. So my opinion, when I was a small business, when I worked at a small business, we asked why. We did the 5 why game, right? Why, or what, right? Ask the question until you're satisfied, because at that point now, you have ownership of that data. And so this is where I think the conversation really is about empowerment of the small shops, to ask the questions, to push back. If something's not clear, because again, it goes back to what I mentioned about the human in the loop. I'm receiving this from a person, so the person may not know, you may not know. Let's seek to understand and clarify everything, because then that part of it will dictate your process and what you need to do internally with regards to CMMC. If that's not defined and you don't understand what's ECI and what's CUI, right? Because once you get that, I need to look at everything. I need to look for CUI markings, ECI markings. I need to look for DFAR callouts. I have all of these things that you need to do, right? Drawing specs, TDPs. I need to make sure that I understand everything, because it's not just CUI ECI, it's federal contract information for level 1 from us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that, because I know that there's been this perception that there's just this massive power dynamic, and a shop just is on the receiving end and they can't push back and they can't ask questions. And there's like, okay, well, I'll just do what I think I should do here. But I'm glad to hear they should, it is more equal. They should say, hey, this is not marked, or it appears that it might be CUI because it's a missile body housing, but it doesn't mark properly. What should I do about this?
So I'll mention a story from when I was at my small company. We were given some flown downs about AFI requirements and all this stuff, and we reviewed the documents, and there was erroneous information, right? Didn't make any sense. We pushed back, we fixed it, and we were able to actually service the request. I don't know how many other companies probably didn't ask those questions, and they were actually out of compliance. If they were audited on that specific thing, it would have been an audit finding, because the work wasn't done, it wasn't documented properly, all those types of things. Everybody should always ask questions. It's like in your personal life. If someone comes to your door, tells me, hey, I need to walk into your house, you'd say, why? What do you need to do? Why are you here? Right? It's your business, right? And so never be afraid to ask questions. And I think from my perspective, if I'm your buyer, your subcontract manager, I'm gonna know that, in my opinion, I'm gonna know that you're actually reading the documentation, that you're actually taking this seriously. If you're not having this conversation, if you're not asking questions, you're just kind of, and this is where we have opportunities. People take the documentation, take the PO, don't actually read it, don't actually review it. And then guess what? 6 months down the road, they start delivering material that doesn't meet the requirements of the PO. Right. So
Yep.
so I would say CMMC goes back to the conversation. It's CMMC is just another checkpoint in your
Sure.
internal auditing, right? That you should be doing already.
Yeah.
It's not this big monument. We shouldn't see it that way. It's an opportunity and it's guidance, right?
Yeah. Oh, this is great. One of the sort of tenets that we just believe so strongly in here at ProShop is that when you get a job, spending a little more time doing a really thoughtful planning process, quality planning, manufacturing planning, is well worth the time investment. If it takes you a couple hours on the front end, you're going to save potentially days on the back end by solving problems before they become problems. But take that further up, do that review at the RFQ stage, look for those mistakes, look for those oversights, look for a drawing rev that's not at the correct rev from what the TDP says it should be. People make mistakes. And if you catch that, and Adam is saying in the chat as well, it's showing that you care, you're detail oriented, and that presents well to that contract manager, that buyer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you mentioned something about like the process, right? So we all have production processes. And I would challenge the folks on the call, do you have a bid process?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Do you have an actual bid process? Because I'm going to throw one more thing out there too, is you bid, you go through the bid proposal process and you don't win the bid. There's still a process after that to dispose the ECI and CUI data.
Good point.
Right. And so it doesn't just start and stop with that piece. You either win the proposal or you don't win the proposal. Either way, you still have requirements after that process step. So I would say, right, it's like the concept of doing a SIPOC. You take, your inputs, your outputs, and your process. You take your bid process and you literally map that entire thing out. This goes back to, like you said, prepping. We do production process prepping and all that stuff, but do your bid process. And I would say even before the CMM discussion, I think there's always been kind of an opportunity with the supply chain side of actually building processes around that.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of been legacy for a very, very long time. Right.
Sure.
It's email oriented. It's person oriented. Right. People oriented. And we really don't do it well. I would say the industry as a whole hasn't done a really good job at moving more to an automated, digitized state with regards to this part of the process.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly proud to say that, our shops, our customers are absolutely doing that. And this idea of even selling with your process is such a huge point. People have heard me say a million times, buyers, primes, they're in the risk mitigation business. Like, you do not want to sign up with a vendor that's going to drop the ball, be late, send in something that's not traceable. And so if you can demonstrate, through your sales process or through an on-site visit or audit that, this is the process of how we're going to run your parts. This is where we store the data. This is how we guarantee only certain people can see it. This is how we guarantee rev control. This is how we guarantee traceability, schedule adherence. Like, that is massively attractive to a prime that wants security and certainty in their supply chain.
So you mentioned one thing there, right? Is so when I worked as a smaller sub tier, I had my own sub tiers. Okay. And so I think about it like an AS9100 audit. I bring that up again. What made our audits easier is we had everything documented, every process documented. We could share it with you. Yeah. And so our audits went like this because everything was documented, and they can just go to a page and say, "Show me this. Here's the process." It's repeatable and reproducible. So from that perspective, one of the things that make it, again, very attractive is when I ask you, "Hey, how are you going to take care of my data and my material, my requirements?" Documented processes. Because now I can walk into your shop and say, "Hey, okay, how do you do business?" Well, here's my SOPs. Here's my documentation. This is what I'm doing, right? Because now, one, you've said to yourself, I can audit myself to my own processes. I can do a gimbal walk on the floor, stand there, open up this page, stare at my process and say, hey, am I on process?
Sure.
Right? But it's the same thing with CMNC. So you just tie that into everything, right? And now I've got a book. This is my shop's Bible. Here you go. This is who I am.
Sure.
The reason why, and I would say what I've seen is whenever you're not performing well, right? That's when you start having folks come to your shop and do those types of things, right? I start doing source audits, looking at your stuff because I'm not performing. And 9 times out of 10, I would say the shops that were not performing or the sub-tier suppliers that were not performing didn't have documented processes. And right, they did just enough to pass an audit for AS9100 or whatever requirement, but the ones that went from, good to great documented everything.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of upfront work, but after that, you don't do it again. You don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah.
Go ahead, finish.
No, I was just going to say, so that piece is super important because I don't think I've ever dealt with a vendor that had everything documented where I've had major issues with.
Yeah.
Even if it's not even from a manufacturing perspective, even third-party vendors for COT solutions, software applications, right? If I've got to troubleshoot something, I don't have issues with them, and we continue to use their applications and their software, right? Documentation's king, and then right, obviously executing and holding your team accountable to those processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was going to say, I see a lot of questions about getting into the primes. How do I get my foot in the door? And I think talking about these processes and procedures is very important, having the documentation for that. I think the easiest way to show that, I'm just speaking from a sales perspective, not from a buyer or anything like that, but the easiest way to show that truly is case studies, right? What did your system look like before you had these processes and procedures? And what does it look like now? And a simple little case study, it could be a little one pager that you just share with a LinkedIn notification, a connection request or an email request, or you're walking a show floor and you're like, hey, I've got this case study, take a look. And it just shows that you're diligent, and then you're also measuring yourself from before and after. So there's a lot of different opportunities like to catch somebody's eye, and there's value in just showing that type of information. So I think that's a really good way to start cracking that door open a little bit. It's not going to open that door fully. There's still a lot more to your systems, a lot more to your offerings that you need to show. But if you can get somebody to read that, you now have their interest and you can start taking it from there.
So what you just mentioned there, right? So there's obviously formal processes for getting to a bid and proposing and all that stuff, right? But to your point, when I go and research a company, to your point, what changed from the year before when I worked with them to now, right? Because I'm going to talk internally. I'm going to ask, hey, Joe's shop, if you guys worked with them last year, how was that, or 5 years ago? How were they? Oh man, they had some problems, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go, like you said, I'm going to go on LinkedIn. I'm going to search them up. I'm going to look them up online. And to your point, if I show objective evidence that I've changed my processes, right? Then that takes away some preconceived notions, but it also makes you stand out because now you're holding yourself accountable, right? So it goes back to that same statement of continuous improvement. Year over year, if I'm not improving, I'm not doing anything, right? So if I can't show that, and I think that goes back to transparency, the digital transparency. If I'm measuring myself and saying, hey, this was my on-time delivery last year, this was my quality ratings for my customers last year or 5 years ago, and look how I've changed the trajectory of my company by making these different changes and how I'm doing business differently, right? That's huge. And that's more digestible because it's quantitative and qualitative, not perception driven.
Yep.
Right? I can measure the change of your company. Those are really, really important things.
Yeah, and I think it's important just to mention real quick, nobody's asking for a case study on every single thing that you do. I mean, pick 2 or 3 a year that you think are important, and really just try to stage those throughout, set it up maybe once a quarter. I'm going to write a case study. I'm going to pick one topic that I think is important about where we're going. It doesn't have to be the most significant gain, and it doesn't have to be the least significant gain. It's
absolutely.
what do you think is the most important to your company, and focus in on that.
So there's a question that someone mentioned, Joe mentioned in chat about when you speak about processes, what are you talking about? Work instructions for everything. So think about processes. I think, so me personally, I think about processes in two ways. I think about, we have measurables, right? Key process indicators, KPIs, and then we also have key business indicators, right? KBIs. And so I would say you've got two things. You've got the granular level of work instructions, which is how you build and produce material. But I would say at a higher level, how do I manage my business, and how do I measure my business? So if I look at a high level bidding process, that's a business indicator to me, not a process indicator. So I'll change the I'll change the verbiage a little bit. My bid process, it's a business indicator because it has multiple processes under them. This is an umbrella term. My bid and proposal has several different things that are taking place. How do I measure success of that business indicator? Because that is an entire thing, right? So I don't necessarily have to go granular. What I'm doing is from that KBI level, I'm measuring the outputs of KPIs. And that's measuring the business part of my bid and proposal, right? High level. Because at an executive level, I'm not going to worry about if Katie did X, Y, and Z on this specific process. I'm looking at business health indication. And so we kind of have to separate the two. One is super granular, specific processes, work instruction level. And then think about QMS, which is really your business indicator, high level, right? I should have that. So process, let me rephrase that. It's really business indication of if you're actually following your processes that are under that umbrella.
That's why we're such strong believers in having your QMS be deeply integrated, woven at the DNA level with your ERP data. Like you cannot separate them, right? The way
100%. Yeah. 100%.
just so
I agree with that.
it makes those audits go so seamlessly. So I want to start getting to some of the questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I'll pair a couple of them together. A shop that's already Lockheed Martin approved and one that's not. How do they get more attention? How do they expand within a prime?
I would say what Dan was alluding to. And so, right, you have your formal processes to bidding and proposing and all those things. I would say to Dan's point is making yourself attractive. We're a digital social society nowadays, right? Word of mouth is great, but digital proof and showing up, like white papers and all these different things about what your company is doing, having, I would say, that social presence is huge. Because there's companies I found just because I keep getting hit up by ads or things popping up in LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh, that's it. And then that one day they said something, it's like, you know what, I'm gonna go look at that company a little bit deeper and see what they've got, right? And now I'm at their website, and their website says, hey, they've got FedRAMP or GovCloud or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's even more attractive. I can go do things with them from that perspective. Or right, the fact that, hey, they have a digital thread. And again, I don't want people to just go out there and put buzzwords all over their websites, because it's also needs objective evidence behind it. But taking that time to kind of building that social media digital presence is super important.
Yeah.
Right, the workforce is getting younger, right? Buyers are younger. They're social media driven. They're on the internet. That's how they're finding people a lot of the times now too. And so I would say the shops that haven't really looked at that, I mean, no one's expecting you guys to do a complete media blitz, right? But I would say get online, right? A post here and there about what your company's doing, how you're changing your business, how you're growing, right? I mean, the primes do it too, right? Everybody's doing that. That's how you get yourself out there. So
Yep. I would also just add to that. I love what you said about that, just getting out there. I think it's important to realize that there's somebody at some prime that is going to relate to you in some way, shape, or form. So just be you, be true to who you are. Don't feel like you have to put on this fake facade just to hit the right person, because the right person is going to find you at some point. So continue just to be yourself, put out there who you want to be seen as and who you are. And that's going to get noticed by somebody.
I love it. Well, we are just about the top of hour. Any sort of last comments, takeaways, or suggestions for people on the call today?
yeah, so for me on my side, I would say I want to just foot stomp that. Right, the concept is, right, the more I see, the more I trust you with. I can't say that enough, because transparency is important, right? We don't want to find out issues down the road. That's typically what you'll have. What happens, right? Is or an email didn't go out. Having that transparency, being able to see what you're doing, how you're servicing us, right? That lets us also give you the insight of what's coming, right? So now it's both ways. I'm about to, let's say, increase production. I see that you only have X amount of material. Hey, I know I'm this by this day, because now I start doing advanced analytics and I say, hey, by January, I need you to ramp up what you got, because I'm going to completely clear you out. We're going to have an issue, right? But the digital thread, the great thing about the digital thread is that we can now look at the entire value stream and predict, right? Now it's a leading indicator versus lagging, right? Leading before things happen, lagging is after the fact. We tend to be reactive, fight fires. Let's become more leading indicator driven folks. Let's look up more upstream before things become a problem. But that's my number one message. And then the second message again too for me is CMMC. I would even say just I would get that out of your mind, that what CMMC is, and just do it. Audit yourself. Get to that point, right? Because when we say CMMC is coming, it's now a monument.
Yeah.
It's this huge tree in front of me, and I can't see the forest now. I'm stuck on this monument, this tree. Take a step back, add it as an action on your audit, your QMS audit, and just do it, right? I think most people, the issue they have right now is not being able to just even start doing the work.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a big piece too, is that I don't know what to do. What do I need to buy? Just stop. Just, it's, before you go to the grocery store, you should open up the cabinet and see what's inside. You write down a list of things that you need, then you go to the store, right? We're kind of doing this, cart before horse. We're like, I need to get all these things. Take an account internally, see what's going on, and go from there.
First, I love it. Yeah.
Well,
I just want to leave with, I have opened up office hours for the next 3 weeks. So if I haven't been able to answer one of your questions, or you have continued questions, you can just check AeroGrowth on LinkedIn, and my office hours link is there. You're more than welcome to book it. I've literally opened up my entire calendar for Monday through Friday. So book it up if you want. But I just want to know I'm available to talk. So
very kind of you. That's awesome. Oh yeah, Lily dropped the link right there for your website. Thank you. And Andy, thank you. That was such great insights. And I know much appreciated by this audience. So yeah, can't thank you enough. And Shane asked, how do I get one of these shirts? Thank you, Machinist. Probably come to our IMTS booth. I'm not sure exactly what swag we're going to have there, but hopefully we have enough time to get some Thank you, Machinist shirts going. So yes, thank you again both so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining today. Keep tuned into our channels. We have more of these this sort of series of webinars related to compliance and defense industry and space. So we have some other good stuff coming with Dan as well. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everyone.